Yes, we are all here. So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining. A very good morning. My name is Tanya, and I will be your host and moderator for this session. We have a great lineup of speakers for all of you, and I will let them introduce themselves in just a minute. A couple of housekeeping items just before we get started. Say hello in the chat on the right. There's also the Q&A tab enabled, so feel free to post questions at any time. We will have time towards the end to take them live. And also just to mention, we are obviously recording today's session, so you can expect a recap and a link to the recording tomorrow. And with the housekeeping out of the way, I will hand it over to my team for quick introductions. Peter, would you like to get started?
Yes, hello and good morning, everybody. Thanks for having us. My name is Peter, and I'm part of NPS.Today on the commercial team. I've been working with customer relationship management for 25 years, and the last 10 years I've been working with customer experience, and I look forward to talking to you today.
Flemming, will you lead next?
Yes, thanks, and hi everyone, and thanks for joining this session. And well, I will be the technical sidekick here, as well as being the guided tour on the demo at the end of the presentation. So we hope you will stick around for that. Back to you, Tanya.
Awesome, thank you very much. Over the next 30 minutes, we're going to primarily focus on three key things. The first is how can we help you work with a common customer pulse so that you have a common unified understanding of your customers' experiences across the entire customer journey, across all of your systems and channels and touch points. The second would be to how can we help you embed customer experience into daily workflows? So it's not just something that you report on and have dashboards on, but it's something that's part of your team's daily work and operations, and something they also talk about on a daily basis. We'll also take you through how can you actually use real customer insight to drive coaching and training development opportunities for your team, something we call perception gap. And I promise you it's not going to be all slides and boring me. We will have a live demo towards the end so we can visualize for you how does a customer experience program look like in practice. So with that, let's get into it. So what we see when we speak with most organizations today is that they are actually already measuring customer experience in some shape, way, or form. They do have already, in many cases, tons of feedback. They have a lot of data on NPS, CSAT, CES, and actually very often also longer questionnaires. And then when we look at the senior leadership teams, the ELT teams, senior management, they also have a lot of their reports and dashboards and insights. So what is actually missing? What is missing is action in the day-to-day, in your daily workflows. What is missing is a clear strategy for leaders to understand how can they take this customer experience and build it into daily operations. How can they make it available to their frontline teams? How can they make it available in the systems their teams are working in so they can see the feedback and they can act on it here and now? Because if we're expecting agents to go faffing around in different systems to find the right feedback, then that's a process that is just waiting to go wrong. So in short, what is actually missing is an operational customer experience program. When we zoom in a little bit and take the situation and focus on the customer service and contact center environment in most organizations, this is where we typically see a lot of CX programs struggle to create real impact. And we actually see this across the board, from small, medium organizations working with local teams to large global multinationals, especially where multiple systems, teams, products, customers are involved. And Peter, you actually have a lot of experience, helping a lot of our customers with their CX programs. So I'm sure you have a wealth of knowledge on some of the most common challenges, especially in the context of service and contact center environments. Would you please speak a bit to that?
Of course, thank you, Tanya. Let me just say a few words about maybe the three biggest challenges we see in an operational CX program, not only in the contact center, but across the customer journey and across the organization. And One of the big ones is format confusion or scale confusion, as we call it. Maybe you measure 1 to 5 in one customer touch point, then you have a yearly NPS on 0 to 10, and then you might have a customer effort score on 1 to 7. So a scale confusion is something we see many places. And this is based on, having different departments with departmental systems, having different channels and then different formats. All those three are big challenges that will makes it harder to have a common customer pulse. And then we have disconnected workflows. So your workflows don't work across the customer journey and across departments. So if something happens in the contact center or in a field service scenario, an account manager might not get notified because things are working in silos. And then finally, we have automation, which is also a thing we see a lack of many places. Manual processes, people have to go look up things in a report. They have to talk to each other. They don't have a common overview, and automated follow-up systems built into their workflows. Yes.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for sharing. Very insightful. So how do we make that shift? The shift on moving from traditional customer experience programs to a more operational automated setup where you're measuring continuously, your customer radar is always on, you're listening to your customers more actively. And that happens when you move from project-based surveys to an always-on feedback, because you want to allow your customers the chance to give you feedback when they are ready for it, when they have something to share, and not when you have a survey project and now you're ready to send out a survey. And it also happens when you actually move away from insights and reports and dashboards and make customer experience a part of the daily work and the daily operations of your team, so they can see how are they performing, what was the customer's experience with the latest interaction they had, and how could they have done better in the future. To make that shift from measuring to actually operating customer experience, you need a consistent way of measuring feedback across all of your customer touchpoints, be that calls, support cases, field service visits, basically wherever it is that you're interacting with your customers. And this is what we call a common customer pulse, which simply means that you measure feedback and responses from your customers in the same way, unified across scale and format, across all your touch points, across all your systems and all your channels. And when you have a common customer pulse in place, there are basically two things you need to ensure that it delivers in practice. And the first one is the process of how you collect and distribute feedback across all of your systems. And the second is, how do you actually go about collecting feedback itself in the first place? So let's look at the first piece, which is how do you operationalize your feedback? And I will illustrate that with an example. So let's take a typical service or contact center team today. What we see is that they are getting incoming messages from customers in a host of different ways. You could get an SMS, you could get an email, it could be a support case, it could be a chat, different ways in which customers are reaching out to us, to our team in the contact center. And these different incoming channels are often handled by different systems. So if it's a support case, it could be handled in Salesforce Service Cloud. If it's an incoming call, it could potentially be on the Genesys contact center system, or if it is an email, it could come into Outlook. And what we typically want is that we don't want feedback to live outside of these systems. We ideally want it to be part of the same flow. And what we aim for when we recommend this setup for our customers is that feedback is triggered automatically based on real interactions in your systems. And this could either be a fully automated process or a semi-automated process, but it's based on interactions in the systems your team is working with. So it could be a support case is closed in Salesforce, or a meeting is completed, or a call is hung up on the Genesys contact center. And that event automatically triggers a survey to your preferred CX platform. And this is actually your central command center for all of your CX workflows, because this is not just way of designing. and defining all of your different survey campaigns, but this is also where you have all of your survey excellence logic built in. So everything from what should set up the survey, how often should it be sent, when should there be a reminder, who should be notified when feedback comes in, anti-spam throttling, all of that is baked into your CX program. So you're actually always in full control of your full CX setup without adding in a lot of complexity. And once the action in your system triggers the survey to your CX platform, that would then send out the survey in the channel that you have chosen. The most common and the primary system triggered surveys are, of course, SMS and email. And very soon we will also have RCS, what you see here at the bottom. RCS is I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but it's rich communication services, which would actually allow you to start having more interactive way of sending SMS surveys to your customers. So instead of having a link that you click and go to another screen, you actually have the survey rating already on the first screen on the SMS, so it's much more interactive. If some of you are familiar with how iMessages work in iPhones, it's very similar to that, and NPS.Today would be one of the first movers on RCS. But there are, of course, many different ways in which you can deploy surveys, and we also recommend that it's always best practice to survey your customers in the channel in which they have reached out to you. So if they're chatting with you, then maybe have an in-chat survey for them. Right. So when feedback comes in, when the customer answers and your CX platform has now captured the feedback, this is actually when things start to get really operational. And there are two levels at which you can then work with feedback. So you can work with it at a team level. So of course it flows back into the systems that your team is working with. They can see the feedback. It's available at their fingertips. You can also ensure there are tasks, follow-up tasks, alerts, notifications set up so that all experiences are taken care of and nothing falls through the cracks. And then you can, of course, also add response feedback to, other team dashboards that you might have in place to measure key metrics and KPI. And at the management level, feedback, of course, feeds into dashboards, reports, and any BI tools that you're working with, so you can combine response data with other company data to get a more holistic, overall comprehensive view of how you're doing and how you've been improving and growing over time. So this is, and of course you can also use AI to enrich response data, especially when it comes to looking at executive management and presenting response data to them. So this is really about embedding feedback into the systems and workflows in which you work in every day. This gives you an all-in-one integrated CX SaaS platform. One place where you manage all of your CX workflows, all of your survey excellence, and which allows you to always be in control. The second piece is actually how you collect feedback, because that is also super critical if you want to be able to act upon it, because feedback is only useful if it is clear enough to dictate what should the next steps from here be. And this is also where we do see often a challenge with some of our customers, as many teams tend to start using the built-in survey tools within the existing systems, which are often limited in that they are more transactional, and they also often lack an intelligent follow-up. So they might give you a score, but they often lack in why is the customer experience, what are they experiencing? And the answer is not to just add a few more questions, because we all know attention span is more limited. We are more distracted now, and more questions could potentially just mean that your response rate goes down. And to solve exactly this challenge, we have introduced a system called the NPS-based smart question flow, which allows you to ask less, ask smart, but actually get the bulk of the information that you are looking for from your customers. So the NPS-based smart question flow always starts with the same scale. You unify the 0 to 10 scale, which is the NPS scale, across all of your questions. And the customization happens in, what are you actually asking them? So this could be, did you receive a satisfactory training session from a field engineer visit today? Or how satisfied are you speaking with our agent when you call in the morning? Or how likely are you to recommend our services to your peer network? Based on the rating, you ask a smart follow-up question, not generic. So if they've had a bad experience, you ask them, why did you have this experience? And if they've had a great experience, then of course you build on that. The follow-up question can be supplemented by predefined categories, so you make it easier for your customers to tell you what is it that they really liked or disliked in their recent experience. If you need to ask more questions, then you can add a few extra questions to your survey, though the recommended best practice is to ask as minimal as possible, because you also want your customers to continue engaging with your survey program the next time around. And if they felt fatigued the first time they're answering the survey, they would be less inclined to do that the next time. And finally, you have a completion text, which can also be based on the initial rating. So, for example, if it's a promoter, then you can encourage them to go to Trustpilot and leave their rating there. Based on the data we have with our customers who are following the recommended best practice and the NPS-based smart question flow, we can see that they consistently meet or exceed the industry average response rate average, which currently sits at around 25%. And actually, by using the same scale across all of your organization, Peter also touched upon that a little bit earlier with data silos, you unify your understanding and your measuring, because now everyone in your organization knows what a 1 stands for and a 5 and a 10, because you're not working with 0 to 10 in this part of the organization and 1 to 5 in this part of the organization. I just want to spend a few more seconds to talk about reason mapping, because this is really where it adds a lot more value. It's very beneficial to our customers, and it really helps them action upon their feedback responses, because with reason mapping, you're not just collecting feedback, but you start the process of structuring your feedback already when you're collecting it. And the best part is, and I think the most powerful part is, that all of this is reportable. So over time, with reason mapping, you can clearly start seeing what's working really well, what are my best performing business drivers, and where is it that we need to put in a bit more effort for improvement. So from feedback to action is one of the most critical steps in your CX program, because this is really key to driving meaningful impact. This is actually key for you to get more ROI out of your CX initiatives. It's absolutely imperative to action upon feedback consistently so that nothing goes unattended, especially if you look at the bad experiences. And what works best to actually foolproof this system is to have an automated closed loop follow-up process, so that every feedback, whether good or bad, has a place that it's anchored and it's taken care of. So you need to have defined alerts, notifications, and follow-up tasks for all kinds of feedback, because I imagine passives and detractors get a follow-up task, but promoters maybe have a different follow-up action, but nevertheless an action, because we also want to celebrate our wins. And you want to do that in the place where your teams are sitting. So if your team is in Salesforce, then they should have a follow-up action coming up in Salesforce, because that is their system. You don't want them going faffing around in different systems. Or if your executive leadership team sits in Teams, then you want follow-up actions and notifications to be consistently showing up in Teams. And this is actually exactly what we will show you in a minute, or Fleming will in the demo, so you can see live how does an operational CX program come to life inside your existing systems and workflows. So we have talked a little bit now about how can you measure, understand, and act on the experiences of your customers. There is one piece that often goes overlooked, and that is actually the information that your own team is sitting with, because they often have a wealth of information on their own experiences with each customer interaction. And this is what we call the perception gap functionality. And I will again defer to Peter, because he's had many successful implementations of the P-gap modality with our clients. Peter, would you please take a minute and share a bit more about this?
Yes, of course, Tanya, I definitely will. So P-gap is perception gap. So this means that, the customer might not always see the conversation the same way you did, or the other way around. And actually, there's been a lot of focus on the situations where the employee is actually rating higher than the customer. But the other way around is also an opportunity for you to celebrate workers that actually really do understand the customer, maybe even better than they think themselves. PGAP is a tool that you don't run consistently because then you'll have PGAP fatigue in your team. So PGAP is planned in some stints, and then you have a break, and then you learn from it, you train your employees, and then you have a break, and then you run PGAP again. So there's a PGAP planning tool inside the campaign manager of NPS.Today, so you can make sure that PGAP only pops up for employees when they are in the PGAP mode. Flemming will show this in a short while. So after the customer, the employee has answered the PGAP survey and the customer as well, then you can compare PGAP, and we even provide those data inside contact center systems so they can be monitored there. And of course, also in reports and team overviews for the team manager. So team managers will be able to immediately see employees with larger gaps that might need some training and support in their work.
Yes, thank you, Peter. Enough of boring me. We have gone through concepts and ways and how you can set up an operational CX program to measure, understand, and act on the experiences of your customers. But now I would like to give the stage to Flemming so he can show you a live demo on how everything looks. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. Flemming, will you share the screen?
Yes. So can you see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. So yeah, we have this platform where we actually have everything that we call also campaigns. And campaigns, those are actually the surveys themselves. That could be the touch points and so on. So here we can go in and define the look and feel in terms of, okay, so what is it that we would like to ask? How would we design it and so on? There's a ton of settings that we can also add to this. So that can be like throttling that was mentioned, or doing follow-ups and so on. So we can do all of that and set that in the tool here. But usually when this is all set up, then we don't have to go into our tool again, because the whole idea is that you can work in the tools that you are used to on a daily basis, and especially for the employees. So let's look at that. So I'll head over to Salesforce and then go in and look up a contacts. I'm signed in as Asbjørn, as an agent, and I'm looking up a contact. And I'm looking up Flemming here, and I can see that he has had quite a few interactions with us over time. But it looks like he is not the most happy trooper, especially on the here in this time of year. So I can see that, and I can see all the responses that have been there. So with the rating, the comments, which campaigns or which touch point, and then the category also called the reason mapping. So I can see that, okay, what are the things that are really important to this contact. So Flemming here, he's part of an account. So I can also look up the account and then see all the responses related to that account. So we have both Flemming, Peter, Asbjørn, Tanya, and so on that has answered surveys related to this account. So we have it all up and can see all these things in here. I can see now that I have a support case going on here with Flemming, and I will go in and close that. And what happens now is that since I'm in a PGAP training session, then I actually get this question, as Peter mentioned. Okay, so what do I think that Flemming will answer here? And I think, nah, I think it's quite good. So I'll give it an 8. And by that, then we actually record that, as well as we make sure that we then send a survey. So I have received that here, the survey, but to tell you the truth, I was not happy with the employee. I think that it was really slow. in terms of actually getting the response from my interaction. I think that the agent was slow and rude. So I would say that that is the employee here. But was the case solved? Yes, it was. So I'll submit this. So when we then look at the data going back and forth, then we have some different tools that we can then work with to get all this looked at. So let's say that I'm now moving over to Genesis. Then here I can actually go in, and then I have an app here. And when that is then updated, then I would actually be able to see responses also related to me. And if someone calls in, then I would also be able to see that here. I can see we are running a bit out of time, so I have to fast forward a bit, but you can actually see the answer here. So you can see the respondent gave a 3, and I thought an 8, so the P gap was 5. And we can define on our end what should actually be seen and be shown here on this. But if someone calls in, I get an update already to see, okay, what is actually going on behind the scenes. So when I go back into my Salesforce here, and I look at the contact, then I would be able to also see that now we got this answer in, and I actually got a task. So that's closing the loop because I got a detractor. So I have a task ready for me here to pick up because we set up a rule that we should do something whenever we receive a detractor. Because, well, yeah, I was apparently slow and rude at the same time. That's impressive. And we also have dashboarding and reporting also within Salesforce where we can see all of these things. But also in some of the other tools that we do have where we can show and see all of this. That could be, for instance, in Power BI, which I will show briefly. Also engaging each employee is really important. So we can also do a bit more like gamification. So we could have like a leader dashboard in terms of which employee is performing the best. And currently, well, Camilla, she's getting the prize. But we could also make it a bit more fun if needed. So we could have like this, where it's cycling, so we can actually see, okay, so who's leading and the current sessions and so on. So that also gets your employees, you can say, up and running about this. But then again, we have also the final step I will show you is then Power BI, where we then have the opportunity to also see the things that are going on overall. So I can jump into as a team manager, for instance, and go in and see, okay, so how are my agents or employees, colleagues, how are they actually doing? And I can click in on them individually to get and see the feedback that is related to them. So that's on a team level, and then I can also have a more overall where I more look into the teams and so on. So I have a wealth of things that I can actually look at and dive into here in Power BI. So with that said, I think I will hand the gauntlet back to Tanya to wrap this up.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Flemming. And I promised you no more slides, but I will just take you through one last slide. And I can see some questions have come up, and we will have the last minute or two to answer that. And if not, I promise we are going to get back individually and answer all your questions. And that is, because nothing goes today without talking about artificial intelligence and how can you use that for customer experience. And there are many ways in which you can use it, but there are two clear ways in which we recommend it because this would give you the most bang for your buck and for your time. So the first is to actually enrich responses in your BI tool. So for example, you could use AI to summarize scores of open text comments to create executive summaries and also translate if you're operating across multiple languages. And the second way is to actually just ask it, prompt the AI to understand, how we're doing and where could we have done better. And we have an AI feedback assistant from NPS.Today, which allows you to actually work with your response data in a much more interactive way than you've been able to do in the past. All right, so maybe we have a minute to go. There are some questions that came up, and I can see, Peter, you already answered. Is there anything else you'd like to add to what Elena had shared? Oh, okay, all right. And we are also out of time. So we actually just covered a bit of our solutions and services. If this sparked your interest and you would like to know more about how we can help you build an operational CX program, feel free to reach out. And it's been a pleasure having you, and have a wonderful rest of the week. Thank you very much. Cheers.